The land they'd broken together, the valley that held all of it, about to be sold for taxes. She was 40 miles away from paying. One road through, one guide willing to take it. A man the whole town had warned her from, quiet-voiced, careful-handed, nothing like the stories. They rode out at first light, and somewhere between the canyon walls and the campfire, dark and the silences that stopped needing to be filled, something neither of them had planned for quietly took root. Everyone in Ridgemont said, "Don't take the canyon." Clara Marsh asked anyway. The land office in Salvation Creek would close its books on the Marsh parcel at noon on Friday. It was Tuesday morning. The pass road, the safe road, the road with a name, added 4 days she didn't have. The canyon cut that to 1.5 if the weather held, if the path held, if a person knew what they were doing. 6 guides had told her the same thing. Not one had been polite about it. The 7th was Mason Hale, and she almost didn't ask. She'd heard the stories before she'd finished tying her horse at the Ridgemont livery. The cliff ride, the storm race, the wagers that made grown men go quiet. A woman at the dry goods counter had grabbed Clara's arm on the way out. "That man has no regard for his own life, which means he has none for yours." He was leaning against the livery fence when she found him working a strip of leather with a small knife. Unhurried, younger than she'd expected. Tall and lean in the way that came from years of hard country, rather than shortage of food. A scar ran along his jaw, faded to white. His horse, a dark ran with a broad chest, stood loose tied nearby, watching her approach, with more calm than most horses managed. She told him what she needed. The canyon, Salvation Creek, Friday noon. He looked up from the leather. His eyes were gray, or something near it. "What's in Salvation Creek?" "The land office." She kept her voice even. "My family's parcel comes up for tax default Friday at noon. I have the payment. I need to be there to make it." He looked at her for a moment. Then he looked at the sky. Not the canyon direction, just the sky, reading something in it she couldn't see. "Your parcel." The knife kept moving against the leather. "Not your husband's, my father's. He's 71 and my mother isn't well. I'm the one who goes." She paused. "I had 2 brothers. Fever took them both when they were young, so it's just me." Mason Hale was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed, low, private, aimed somewhere past her left shoulder, not at her. She understood that instinctively, even before she'd worked out why. It was the laugh of a man who'd had this argument with the canyon before, and already knew he was going to win it. He named his price, fair even. He told her they'd leave at first light and to pack light and sleep if she could. She spent the night expecting a reckless man. He was at the livery before dawn, already saddled. Clara arrived to find him crouched beside her mare, running his hand down the near foreleg with slow attention. He checked both stirrups after that. Not a glance, a real check. Testing the leather, adjusting the left 1-2 notches without comment. Only then did he mount the ran. "She favors the left rein," he said. "Give her a little more right than feels natural on the switchbacks. She'll correct." Clara hadn't known that about her own horse. She filed it away and said nothing. The canyon entrance came an hour out of Ridgemont. A crack in the red rock that widened as they pushed in. The walls climbing until the sky above them narrowed to a pale strip. The air changed, cooler, stiller. The sound of the horse's hooves bounced back at odd angles, and Clara found herself holding her breath without meaning to. Mason rode ahead, but not far. Close enough that she could hear him when he spoke. And he spoke often enough. Not filling silence for the sake of it, but steadily, like he was giving her something to hold on to. He told her about the canyon's moods, which turns were slow and which were slower. He pointed out the watermarks on the walls from the spring floods. 20 feet up, rust-colored, impossible to look at, without feeling the weight of all that water. "Does it flood now?" she asked. "Dry season." He glanced back. "We're fine." She believed him. That surprised her. The path narrowed at the first real traverse. A ledge shelf above a drop she didn't look at directly. Mason dismounted without ceremony, passed his reins over the ran's neck and walked to her side. "I'll go beside you here. I can manage. I know you can." He took a position at the mare's left shoulder, one hand light on the bridle, not gripping, just present. Canyon's loud on this section. She may startle at the echo. He was right. 20 yards in, a loose stone skittered off the edge, and the crack of it, hitting the rock below, bounced back doubled. The mare's ears went flat. Mason's hand didn't tighten. It steadied, a small motion, barely visible, and he was already talking something about the time he'd been crossing this exact ledge, and his boot had come half off, and he'd had to stop and fix it, while his horse looked at him with what he could only describe as professional disappointment. Clara laughed before she could stop herself. The mare's ears came forward. They cleared the traverse. She didn't thank him. He didn't seem to need it. The rockslide came in the early afternoon on the long middle passage, where the walls leaned in close, and the light fell gold and thin. Not the catastrophic kind the locals warned about, but enough. A sound like a rifle crack. Then the upper wall let go. Clara's mare shied hard left, and she had her hands full for 3 long seconds, talking the animal down, legs steady, weight back, until the shuddering stopped and the dust began to rise in slow columns. When she looked up, 50 yards of path ahead had simply ceased to exist. Red rubble, chest high in places, stretching around the bend, out of sight. Mason had the ran under control already. He sat very still, reading the fall the way he'd read the sky that morning in Ridgemont, looking for what it was telling him, rather than what he wanted it to say. Small stones still ticked down. The dust drifted. "How long?" Clara said, not quite a question. To clear enough to pass, he turned it over. "Morning. If we start at first light and the back section isn't worse than the front." She looked at the sky above the canyon walls. The pale strip had gone the color of embers. An hour of light left, maybe less. She wanted to argue. She understood the arithmetic too well to bother. Behind them, the ledge traverse. Ahead, rubble. Above them, walls that offered nothing. "We camp," Mason said, and dismounted. She sat for a moment longer before following, just long enough to let herself feel the full weight of it. The parcel, the clock, the distance still between her and Salvation Creek. And then she climbed down and got to work. He'd already started the fire by the time she'd seen to the horses. A wide natural shelf in the canyon wall made a decent camp. The rock held the day's warmth and reflected the firelight back. He set water to boil without ceremony, laid out bread and dried meat between them, and that was that. A table where there was no table. She sat. She ate. The canyon settled around them into its night sounds, the occasional tick of cooling rock, the distant movement of water somewhere deep in the stone. The fire was the whole world. "Tell me about it," Mason said. Clara looked up from the fire. "The parcel." He wasn't looking at her. His eyes on the flames, voice easy, giving her room. "You don't have to, but you've been carrying it since Ridgemont. Sometimes it helps to put something down, even just for a night." She was quiet for a moment. The canyon walls rose black above them, stars sharp in the narrow strip of sky. She'd gotten good these past months at not talking about it. Talking about it meant feeling it, and feeling it didn't get the work done. But the work was done for tonight. There was nothing left but the fire and the dark and a man who had walked a ledge he didn't need to walk. She told him the homestead 40 miles east of Salvation Creek, in a valley that caught the afternoon light like a bowl holding water, Her father had broken the first ground himself before she was born, with a mule that was half blind and a determination that people in the valley still talked about. Her brothers had helped him build the second fence line, the longer one, the one that circled back along the creek. She'd been too young to help then, so she'd brought water and watched, and her brothers had let her hammer the last post on the final corner, because even then they'd understood that a thing like that needed to belong to everyone. The fever came when she was 9. Took the older one first, then the younger within a week of each other. Her parents had gone somewhere behind their eyes for a long time after that. They'd stayed, though. Leaving would have meant those boys had broken that ground for nothing, and some things a family cannot survive the doing of. 2 years of drought had done what grief hadn't managed. The taxes gone unpaid, the notice arriving, the land office's patience running out. Clara had taken work in Ridgemont the moment she was old enough to be useful. She'd saved with a ferocity that left no room for anything else. What she carried in her coat pocket right now was exactly enough to the dollar if she reached the office before noon on Friday. Mason hadn't moved while she spoke. The firelight held him still, and the stillness wasn't absence. It was the particular quality of attention she'd felt from him all day. Like the way he'd listened to the canyon. Like he understood that some things required you to stop making noise and simply receive. When she finished, the silence was clean. He stayed with it for a moment. Then he reached into his coat and brought out a piece of wood and the small knife. And for a while, the only sound was the fire and the faint, careful scrape of the blade. "My father had land too," he said finally. He wasn't looking at her. The knife moved in slow, deliberate strokes. Different kind. Bought it on promises that didn't hold and sold it on debts he couldn't outrun. By the time I was 15, it was someone else's. A pause. He never went back to the valley it was in. Said it would hurt too much. I always thought that was backwards. That the valley didn't know it had changed hands. That it was still the same valley. Another pause longer. That the only thing lost was the time he could have spent in it. Clara watched the knife move over the wood. "Is that why you know the canyon?" she asked. "Because you stopped being afraid of what a place could take from you?" He considered that seriously. She appreciated that he didn't answer quickly. Maybe he said at last, or maybe I just learned that the way through most things is the same. You go steady, you pay attention. You don't confuse the danger with the place itself. The fire cracked and settled. Above them, the stars had thickened, the canyon walls dark and close, and she realized slowly. Not threatening anymore, just present, just stone, holding its shape the way stone did, indifferent and enduring. She hadn't noticed when that shift had happened. They cleared the rubble in the gray hour before full dawn. Mason worked from one end, Clara from the other, shifting what could be shifted, finding the line through what couldn't. Her back ached, and her hands bled in 2 places. And she didn't stop. Neither did he. They didn't talk much. There was a rhythm to the work that talking would have broken, and they both seemed to understand that without saying so. When the path was passable, Mason looked it over once, walked it on foot, looked it over again. "Steady pace through here. Don't rush it. I know, you know." A pause. Something in his expression that wasn't quite a smile, but was close to it. "I say it anyway." They rode out of the canyon as the sun cleared the eastern wall, and the light hit the open country beyond like a door swinging wide. Clara pulled up the mare without thinking, just breathed. The valley spread below and beyond it the rooftops of Salvation Creek. And beyond that Friday and the land office and the weight she'd been carrying since before Ridgemont, since before the notice arrived, since the moment she'd understood that if she didn't go, no one would. Mason came alongside her. He didn't say anything. He let his ran stand close and he waited. "We'll make it," she said. Not quite to him. "We will," Mason said. The clerk at the land office had the particular energy of a man who had stamped a great many papers and expected to stamp a great many more, and felt no strong feeling about any of it. Clara set the payment on his desk. He counted it twice, wrote a number in his ledger, and pressed the stamp down on the receipt, with a sound like a door closing firmly on something that had been left open too long. She stood on the steps outside with the paper in her hands. The street moved around her, wagons, voices, a dog, investigating something near the feed store. Ordinary Friday morning. Nobody knew what the paper meant. Nobody knew about the valley or the fence line her brothers had finished, or her mother's hands folding and unfolding in her lap the morning Clara had written out. She let herself feel it anyway, quietly, standing there in the sun. The parcel was still theirs. Her father's half-blind mule had broken that ground, and it was still theirs. The boys who'd let her hammer the last post were still a part of something that existed in the world. She breathed once, slow. Then she folded the receipt and put it inside her coat close. Mason was across the street sitting on the steps of the feed store, the carving in his hands. He'd finished it overnight. She could tell by the smoothness of it when he held it out as she crossed toward him. A horse, small enough to sit in the palm. Her mare's broad forehead, the particular set of those ears, 4 legs caught in mid-stride. "Recognized her," he said. Clara turned it over. The cuts were small and careful, the kind of work that didn't announce itself. The same hands that had steadied the bridle on the ledge, that had shifted rubble before dawn without complaint, that had held the knife across the fire while he told her quietly about a valley his father had stopped visiting. "Thank you," she said, "for all of it. Canyon does most of the work." He stood, dusted his hands, a pause. "I just know the way through." She looked at him in the Friday morning light. This man that Ridgemont had called reckless, that the woman at the dry goods counter had warned her from, that 6 other guides had used as a cautionary comparison. This man, who had checked her stirrups in the dark, and walked a ledge he didn't need to walk, and listened to her whole story without once trying to fix it. They'd been reading the wrong thing in him. All of them. "Come to the valley," she said. "Come in spring. My father needs help with the fence line, and the work is real, and the pay is honest." She held his gaze. "And the country is good." Mason looked at the receipt-shaped outline beneath her coat, at the carved horse in her hands, at the sky above Salvation Creek, which was the same sky that sat above the valley 40 miles east, above the house her father had never left. Above the corner post her brothers had let her hammer because a thing like that needed to belong to everyone. "I'd want to know the land first," he said. "That's what spring is for." The almost smile came slow and finished itself completely, transforming his face into something that had nothing in common with the stories told about him. "Fair enough," Mason Hale said. 3 months later, a rider passing through Ridgemont stopped at the dry goods counter and mentioned in passing that a man named Hale had spent the winter repairing fence line in a valley east of Salvation Creek, and that the family there, an old man and his wife and their daughter, looked like people who'd finally put something heavy down. The woman behind the counter thought about that for a long time. Then she thought about what it meant to read a person wrong. She didn't say anything, but she stopped telling the story about the cliff ride. Some stories, she decided, had better endings than their beginnings deserved.